Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When Clint Barlow returned to his remote mountain cabin after a routine supply run, he expected silence and solitude. Instead, he found his gate locked, a smug HOA sign in its place, and a battle for his land just beginning. They picked the wrong man and the wrong mountain. I had only been gone for a week. A simple supply run to Reading, groceries, chainsaw, oil, propane, the usual. 7 days of traffic, receipts, and city noise, and the whole time I was itching to get back to my cabin in the mountains. My 12-acre spread in Northern California wasn't just home. It was solitude, the kind of quiet most people pay therapists to imagine. I pulled up the gravel road, my truck bouncing slightly as the familiar bend came into view. That's when I saw it, and my stomach dropped. The gate was locked. Not just locked, changed. Gone was the keypad and the old rusted padlock I installed years ago. In its place was a polished steel deadbolt embedded into a heavy-duty bracket that I definitely hadn't approved. Worse, a fresh aluminum sign was bolted right above it, clean font glaring against the wood. Private road, HOA access only. For key requests, contact Karen Fairwood, President, Aspen Pines Vista HOA. I sat there in my truck for a moment, engine humming, trying to process what the hell I was looking at. I wasn't part of any HOA, never had been. My land wasn't in their subdivision. Their closest property line was over 600 feet away through thick pine. I knew this land. I used to survey it for a living, but somehow, someone had the gall to seal me out of my own damn home. I stepped out, marched to the gate, and gave the lock a hard tug. It didn't budge. I tried the old code on the side panel out of habit. Dead. Disconnected. I climbed up the fence post and swung over with the finesse of a man 15 years younger and 20 pounds lighter than I actually was, nearly catching my jacket on the chain wire. My boots hit my driveway like I'd just landed in enemy territory. The cabin was fine. My shed, my smoker, even the carved Barlow sign over the porch, untouched. But the gate. The gate was a declaration. I stomped around the property, checking for more signs of intrusion. Nothing obvious. No tire tracks in the back paths. No boot prints near the workshop. Just that gleaming sign at the entrance like a slap across the face. I didn't have to wonder long who was behind it. Her name was right there in all caps. Karen Fairwood, President of Aspen Pines Vista, self-appointed Empress of Suburbia. I'd had maybe 2 run-ins with her over the past couple of years, both annoying, both forgettable. But this was a new level of delusion. I headed down the eastern boundary trail to check the old service path, an overgrown route that wrapped behind my property. Took me 40 minutes of careful hiking and some choice words to myself, but eventually I made it to the other side and circled back up my driveway. That's when I saw Jim Wallace, my new neighbor, stepping out of a shiny black SUV on the other side of the gate. Middle-aged, turtlenecked, with the posture of someone who'd just bought a plot and thought he owned the mountain. And in his hand, a key. He didn't even flinch when he saw me. "Oh, Clint, right?" he said, unlocking the gate with practiced ease. "Didn't realize you were back so soon." I crossed my arms. "Why do you have a key to my gate?" He gave me a casual shrug like we were chatting about weather. Karen gave me one, said she was updating the road access to better align with community usage. "I'm putting in a horse barn on my parcel, and this was the logical way through." "You mean through my private driveway?" "Well," he tilted his head like he was humoring a child. Karen said this stretch had always been kind of shared space, informal easement or something. "Look, I'm happy to coordinate, but the construction crew starts next week." I stared at him, dead silent, until the smile slid off his face. Then I stepped forward and said flatly, "Unlock that gate. Right now." To his credit, he obeyed, but not without a sigh and a dismissive, "You should talk to Karen." I didn't respond. I waited until he drove off, then locked the gate from the inside and shoved a steel pipe through the hinges to keep it shut. No way was I letting another smug wannabe cowboy treat my land like a through road. Back inside the cabin, I dug out my folders, title deed, property map, survey markers, the original land grant, everything in order. I poured myself a stiff drink and stared out the window at the twilight settling over the ridge. They'd started something. They just didn't realize yet how badly they'd misjudged the man on the other side of that fence. The next morning, I was in my truck before sunrise, heading straight to the county land records office in Siskiyou. I didn't sleep much. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that smug HOA sign bolted to my gate, and Jim Wallace waving that key like he owned the place. The whole drive down the mountain, I kept running over the facts in my head. I own that land, all 12 acres, free and clear. I knew the deed, the survey lines, the GPS coordinates like the back of my hand. Hell, I used to make those maps for a living. So either Karen had gone completely insane or something uglier was going on. At the recorder's office, I didn't waste time with small talk. I walked up to the counter and asked to see the most recent filings related to Parcel 32B, mine. The clerk, a skinny guy with a lanyard full of coffee-stained access cards, tapped around on his screen, then frowned slightly. Looks like there's a supplemental filing on that parcel last week. Amendment to the boundary map, lot line clarification, and something flagged as a mutual access agreement. My jaw tensed. Who filed it? He scrolled. Applicant listed as Clint Barlow. Bullshit, I snapped. The clerk blinked. Excuse me, I said, forcing my voice lower. That's me. I never submitted anything. He turned the screen toward me. Sure enough, there it was. My name, my parcel number, and under signature of owner. A scribbled mess that looked vaguely like my name if you'd written it while being attacked by bees. I asked for a printout and a copy of the original boundary map for comparison. The changes were obvious. According to this new filing, the first 80 feet of my driveway, the part connecting my cabin road to the public lane, now fell under an HOA cooperative easement, granting shared access to neighboring stakeholders. Neighboring stakeholders. That's what they were calling Wallace and his damn horses now? I demanded a full document package and asked to speak to the department supervisor. A few minutes later, a woman named Andrea came out, sharp suit and sharper eyes. I laid out everything. My deed, my title insurance, even an old GIS overlay from when I worked in the field. Andrea took it all seriously, flipping through the forged paperwork with growing concern. This shouldn't have passed preliminary intake. I can flag it and file an official correction request, but we'll need to open a fraud investigation. If this signature wasn't yours, someone committed a criminal act. Karen Fairwood, I said. Aspen Pines Vista HOA. Start there. Back in the truck, I called a friend of mine, Thomas Kincaid, a property attorney I'd worked with on a boundary dispute years back. He picked up on the second ring. Clint? Jesus, haven't heard from you in forever. What's on fire? Maybe my whole damn property, I said. I think someone just filed a fake easement on my land. He whistled low. Karen. Bingo. Okay, start by filing a notice of intent to contest at the county office. I'll draft a restraining order to halt any enforcement on that easement. If she tries to do anything, construction keys, whatever, she'll be in contempt. I thanked him and ended the call. As I pulled back onto the highway, my phone buzzed again. A voicemail alert. Unknown number. I hit play on speaker. Mr. Barlow, this is HOA legal enforcement on behalf of Aspen Pines Vista. This message serves as your final warning to vacate the easement zone immediately. Continued trespass on HOA protected property will result in civil penalties. Please coordinate with President Karen Fairwood for access arrangements. I almost veered off the road. I got home just past noon, heart still pounding from the sheer gall of it all. I walked up to the gate. The HOA sign was still there, taunting me. That's when I noticed something new, a laminated envelope zip-tied to the fence. Inside was an official-looking document labeled Notice to Comply, Unauthorized Structure on HOA Right-of-Way. Attached was a photo of my own cabin circled in red marker. That was it. That was the moment I stopped being annoyed and started getting dangerous. The day after I received the Notice to Comply, I didn't waste a second. I drove into town and filed an official fraud complaint at the county clerk's office, attaching copies of my original deed, a sworn affidavit denying the signature, and every single photograph and GIS overlay I had proving the driveway was mine. Thomas, my attorney, met me at his office that afternoon with a thick folder of forms, including a drafted temporary restraining order against the Aspen Pines Vista HOA. His paralegal overnighted it to the county court. By the next morning, a judge had reviewed our emergency filing. The restraining order was granted. It barred the HOA and any and all persons acting on its behalf from accessing, altering, or claiming ownership of any portion of my land until the dispute was resolved. It also legally froze the bogus boundary revision. I took a printed copy of the court order, laminated it, and nailed it directly to the metal post where their smug little HOA sign had been. Then I took things a step further. I hired a welding crew from Eureka to install a custom steel gate barrier across the driveway. Not just a fence, a solid 4-inch thick, industrial-grade, painted black wall of defiance. At the center, in white block letters, I had them stencil. Property of Clint Barlow, trespassers will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. The work took 6 hours. By dusk, my driveway looked like the entrance to a military base. I stood nearby with my thermos of coffee and a baseball bat, just in case Karen or her lapdogs tried anything stupid before the weld dried. I didn't have to wait long. The next morning, I heard shouting near the gate. I stepped outside and saw Karen standing there, hair perfectly curled, clutching a clipboard like it was holy scripture. With her were 2 men, one in a blazer, the other in HOA security uniform, complete with a badge that said Private Enforcement Officer, as if that meant a goddamn thing. She called out with that shrill, assertive tone of hers, "Mr. Barlow, you are in direct violation of community compliance standards. This obstruction is illegal." I walked slowly up the driveway, holding a copy of the restraining order. "Karen," I said flatly, "you're trespassing. And your little security officer is 1 cease and desist away from impersonating law enforcement." She ignored me and motioned to the man in the blazer. "This is Mr. Newcomb, HOA counsel. He'll be issuing a cease and desist if you don't immediately dismantle this obstruction and allow our member property owners access." I smiled. "Funny, I've got one of those too." I handed them the restraining order. Newcomb read it, his face sinking slightly as he skimmed the highlighted portions. Karen wasn't finished. "This isn't over," she hissed. "You may think you've got the law on your side, but our development was granted road access under previous agreements with the county. That driveway is a right-of-way. Your barriers are hostile and obstructive." "Actually," I said, pointing at the survey markers I had reinstalled earlier that week, "this barrier is 15 feet inside my property line, and I have 20 years of documentation to prove it." She glared at me like I'd personally kicked her poodle. That evening, just as the sun dipped behind the trees, I spotted Jim Wallace again. He'd parked down the road, staring at the new gate like it personally offended his sense of entitlement. I walked down to meet him. "You're really doubling down on this," he said. I didn't respond. He glanced toward the ridge where he'd planned to build his equestrian expansion. "Karen told me the easement's real, that it's enforceable. She also told me this was a community," I said. Turns out she just meant it was hers. Jim didn't argue. He just got back in his SUV and drove off, slower than usual. That night, I slept with the door bolted and my phone on the nightstand, fully charged. I knew they weren't done, not by a long shot. But now I was dug in. Let them come. I woke up to the sound of metal grinding. It was just after 3 in the morning. The woods were dead silent. No wind, no birds, just that scraping, metallic ka-chunk coming from the direction of my driveway. I was out of bed in seconds, pulled on my boots, grabbed my flashlight and the Mossberg 500 I kept behind the door, and slipped outside. As I moved through the trees along the trail that curved toward the front of my property, I killed the flashlight and crouched low. The rhythmic grinding was clearer now. Someone was at the gate. My gate. And they weren't trying to be subtle. I edged forward and got a glimpse through the pines. There were 2 men in reflective vests using an angle grinder on the bolts of my steel barrier. One was muttering something about cutting time, while the other held a flashlight steady. Nearby sat a contractor van, logo peeled off, but still showing ghost outlines of a landscaping company. They were halfway through the bottom hinge. That's when I saw her. Karen stood behind them in a fleece jacket, arms crossed, sipping coffee from a stainless steel thermos, like she was supervising a road crew. No clipboard this time. She didn't expect to file a complaint. She expected results. I turned the safety off the shotgun, stepped into the open, and flipped on my flashlight. Beam centered right on Karen's smug face. "Step away from the gate." The grinder stopped. Both men froze. Karen squinted into the light, shielding her eyes. "Oh, Clint," she said, calm as ever. "No need for theatrics. These men are just here to clear a non-compliant obstruction. The HOA has legal precedent to—" "You're violating a court order," I cut in. "And those 2 just committed felony trespass and vandalism. I've got it all on camera." I gestured with the flashlight to the motion-activated trail cam nestled in the tree behind them. It blinked red, still recording. One of the workers cursed under his breath and took a step back. Karen's jaw twitched. "You're being unreasonable." "No, Karen," I said, stepping forward slowly, the gravel crunching under my boots. "I'm being patient. which is rapidly running out. She turned to the men. Pack up, we're leaving. They tossed the grinder in the van and peeled off fast enough to spit gravel onto the easement. Karen climbed into the passenger seat, but not before hurling one last gem over her shoulder. This isn't finished. No, it wasn't. By dawn, I had downloaded the footage and emailed it to Thomas. He called me by noon. She's not just desperate, she's sloppy. That video shows premeditated criminal trespass and willful property damage in violation of a court order. We'll be amending the lawsuit by morning. But I wasn't done. That afternoon, I drove to a specialty security supplier in Eureka and picked up 4 more hidden trail cameras, each with night vision and cellular upload. I placed them at every angle of the perimeter, high in the trees, tucked beneath camouflage netting. I installed a motion-triggered floodlight over the new gate and a sign that read, "Surveillance in progress. All activity reported to Siskiyou County Sheriff's Department." And then, just for good measure, I added a backup battery power unit in case someone got cute with the main breaker box. It paid off faster than I expected. 3 nights later, my phone buzzed at 2:30 a.m. Motion alert. I rolled over, opened the live feed, and there she was again. Karen. This time alone. Flashlight in one hand, bolt cutters in the other. She tried twice to clip the new padlock before giving up, slamming the tool into the gate and yelling, "You don't even use this damn road!" I watched, dumbfounded, as she stomped off, muttering to herself about entitlement and hoarding. And there it was, caught in 1080p with audio, a direct verbal admission that she was trying to reclaim a part of my land simply because she felt like I didn't need it. I sent the footage to Thomas. His reply came in one line, "That's motive and intent. She just handed us the case." Thomas filed the amended complaint the very next morning. Alongside the original charges of trespassing and fraudulent land claims, we added criminal damage, violation of a court order, and, most importantly, intent to defraud, backed by Karen's recorded late-night monologue. Within 48 hours, a county judge approved a motion for expedited discovery. We could now formally subpoena HOA communications, contractor invoices, and internal records from Aspen Pines Vista. And that's when the fun really started. Thomas called me 2 days later, barely able to contain the grin in his voice. "You're going to love this," he said. One of the subpoenaed contractor invoices. It's addressed to Fairwood Ventures LLC, a holding company that's registered to Karen's husband. Same company just bought a strip of land right next to your east property line. I blinked. They bought it already. Last month. Cash deal. And guess what's in the development plans they submitted to the zoning board? Let me guess. I muttered. Stables, horse barn, private access drive through my land. Bingo. It wasn't just a bad idea anymore. It was a scheme. Karen had tried to carve up my land to increase her husband's property value and give their pet financier Wallace a path for expansion. The driveway seizure was just the first move. It got worse. Much worse. As part of discovery, Thomas pulled internal HOA board emails. Several members had already turned on Karen and were cooperating quietly to protect themselves. Among the leaked threads were emails where Karen wrote things like, "Clint isn't using the eastern parcel. It's practically dead land. Let's push the easement quietly and deal with fallout later. We can rezone once the fence is down and the new lot lines are accepted in practice." But one thread, subject line, "Discretion requested," had a bombshell. It was a chain between Karen and Wallace, dated 3 weeks before I'd returned from town. In it, Karen wrote, "I've taken steps to realign access. Gate modification underway. Documents filed in Clint's name. Should hold up for now. We'll notify Wallace once lock is changed." I printed the thread and stared at the lines until the ink started to blur. She forged the documents. She knew they were forged. And she did it not just to harass me, but to create value for her own network of buyers. That night, as I sat on my porch, Thomas called again. "The DA wants a meeting," he said. "You've got enough for criminal conspiracy to defraud, forgery, unlawful encroachment, maybe even mail fraud if we dig into how those notices were delivered. What about the HOA? Karen's going to take the fall, but the board's already circling the wagons. If we pressure them, we can add the HOA itself as a co-defendant. Negligent supervision, systemic abuse." "Do it," I said. "All of it." We scheduled the meeting with the district attorney for the following week. In the meantime, I made one last move of my own. I printed giant versions of Karen's emails, laminated them, and stapled them to the inside of the steel gate, facing outward, like a war trophy. The sign above them read, Here's your shared access. Later that week, someone ripped the signs down. I put up 3 more. The next day, flyers started showing up around the HOA neighborhood. Clint Barlow is destroying our community access. They included a blurry photo of me welding the gate shut and some vague claims about aggression and hostility. The text was clearly written by someone trying to sound concerned while seething through their teeth. Didn't matter. The tide was already turning. Karen's once loyal board allies were jumping ship. Residents began organizing a petition for an emergency recall of her position. A few even reached out to me, anonymously, saying they were sorry and had no idea how far she'd gone. And yet, I knew Karen wouldn't quit. People like her don't stop when they're losing. They double down. I just had to be ready for the final blow. The formal fraud investigation was now in full swing. The district attorney's office had scheduled interviews, and subpoenas were landing on Karen's desk like bricks from orbit. But just as we were gaining momentum, the HOA did what bureaucracies do best when cornered. It tried to distance itself and rebrand the mess as a rogue individual's actions. I wasn't buying it, and neither was the DA. Karen's husband, meanwhile, had gone quiet. His LLC's plans for the barn abruptly withdrawn from the zoning board with no explanation. Wallace hadn't been seen near my fence in over a week. The pressure was mounting, and they knew it. But then came the move I didn't see coming. A county clerk contacted Thomas saying that a complaint had been filed against me by Karen and the HOA. The allegation: deliberate obstruction of shared access, vigilante behavior, and endangerment of public safety. They claimed I'd trapped HOA members inside the community by sealing off a legacy access point without due notice. They submitted drone photos of my property with superimposed arrows pointing to old footpaths that hadn't been used in decades. They even claimed my steel gate was an act of aggression. Thomas nearly laughed reading it. It's desperation, they're flailing, but we'll still need to respond. The court gave us 2 weeks. That was fine by me, because I had something even better. The night after the new complaint was filed, one of my cameras caught something unexpected. Not sabotage this time. A white SUV parked just off the ridge trail, 2 men unloading black garbage bags full of paperwork near a dry ravine and setting them on fire. I watched the video 5 times. The plates were blurred by the headlights, but the vehicle model matched one registered to a certain HOA board member who'd recently resigned for personal reasons. Thomas sent a preservation request to the sheriff's office that same night. 3 days later, we received another tip. Anonymous, but detailed. It pointed to an off-site storage locker under the name of APV Advisory Group. We sent the DA the info. Within 48 hours, a warrant was issued. What they found made Karen's forged signature look like amateur hour. In that locker were HOA records dating back over a decade, most legitimate, but scattered among them were files with handwritten notes like, "Push through while he's out of town. Submit under scan doc. Don't use HOA letterhead. Wallace needs clearance on the south path. Fast track county form." They weren't just trying to take my land. They'd done this before. A retired widow 3 streets over had apparently lost a slice of her lot to a fence correction 5 years earlier. Another man's garage was cited as encroaching, then mysteriously demolished by contractors after he refused to pay a fine. No one ever sued. Most didn't even understand what had happened. Thomas's voice was cold on the phone when he called. "We're not just filing for civil damages anymore. We're pushing for criminal racketeering under California law." That night, my mailbox was ripped off its post. Someone poured a bucket of black paint across my driveway and left tire tracks back to the road. I didn't bother calling Karen. I just sent the footage to the sheriff and added it to our case file. The next morning, I got a call from a local reporter named Kayla Trent. She had caught wind of the case through public court filings and wanted an interview. Normally, I wouldn't entertain it, but this time I wanted light on every corner of this rot. We met at a diner in town. I gave her everything: the forged documents, the gate sabotage, the late-night grinder footage, the burned files, the emails, even the HOA complaint against me. She listened quietly, took notes, and said one sentence as she stood to leave. "They picked the wrong mountain." The article dropped 3 days later. "When your HOA thinks it owns you." A land grab story from Siskiyou County. It went viral across the region. By nightfall, local news stations were parked outside Aspen Pines Vista. Karen's house, empty. A moving truck pulled out of her driveway that same afternoon, but I wasn't celebrating yet. The hearing on the HOA's countersuit was still scheduled, and something told me they had one last card to play. The courtroom was packed. It was the kind of hearing usually reserved for celebrity meltdowns or murder trials, not property disputes. But the scandal had taken on a life of its own. Reporters lined the benches. HOA residents sat in stiff silence behind the plaintiff's table, and on my side of the aisle, several of my own neighbors had come just to support me. Some had never spoken to me before this all started. Now they were nodding grimly as I walked in. Karen entered last. She looked like hell. Gone was the blowout hair, the tailored pantsuits, the self-assured gait. She wore a gray blazer that was one dry cleaning away from unraveling and walked like every step brought her closer to sentencing, because it probably did. The judge, a woman in her late 60s with a stare sharp enough to cut pipe, opened proceedings with the HOA's complaint against me. Their lawyer, some overpriced suit from Sacramento, tried to argue that my gait obstructed public utility corridors, that I had engaged in malicious isolation, and that I was provoking tension with excessive signage. He didn't make it 5. Minutes before, the judge stopped him. "Counselor," she said, "before we even consider your client's claims, are you prepared to explain the court why a forged easement document bearing Mr. Barlow's name was filed with the county assessor?" The lawyer stammered something about pending clarification, but she waved him off. Then it was Thomas's turn. He laid everything out like a sledgehammer hitting drywall. The forgery, the surveillance footage, the verbal admissions, the emails from Karen, the burned documents, and finally, the wider scheme of land misappropriation buried in that storage locker. One by one, the puzzle pieces clicked together in public record. We submitted expert forensic analysis confirming the forged signature wasn't mine. Time-stamped video showing Karen supervising the attempt to cut my gate open. Screenshots of her emails admitting intent to realign access. County GIS maps proving the road in question was fully within my boundary. HOA internal memos detailing similar easement efforts against at least 4 other homeowners. And then came the dagger. The prosecution submitted a surprise affidavit from a former HOA board member, someone who had quit quietly 6 months prior. In it, they detailed Karen's strategy to reclaim underutilized land, explaining how she used delayed filings, friendly contractors, and forged access notices to forcibly absorb property she thought should belong to the community. The judge read the affidavit silently, then looked directly at Karen. "Mrs. Fairwood, do you understand that what's being alleged here is not simply a civil violation, but an orchestrated criminal effort to misappropriate land under false pretenses?" Karen didn't speak. She just sat there, eyes glassy, fingers ringing her pen like it might turn into a magic wand and teleport her out of the room. The judge cleared her throat. In light of the overwhelming evidence and pending criminal investigation, this court is issuing the following orders. The Aspen Pines Vista HOA is hereby enjoined from making any claims or alterations relating to Mr. Barlow's property. A formal ruling affirms Mr. Barlow's full ownership of all disputed land and access roads. The HOA shall pay damages of $1,500,000, covering trespass, harassment, property sabotage, emotional distress, and legal expenses. Mrs. Karen Fairwood is to be taken into custody for booking, pending criminal charges for conspiracy, fraud, and violation of court orders. The bailiff walked up and cuffed her without fanfare. She didn't even protest, just stared straight ahead, lips tight, a thin line of denial holding back what little was left of her dignity. As they walked her out, one of the reporters snapped a photo. I didn't look at her. I looked at the judge, nodded once, and said nothing. Outside the courthouse, Thomas shook my hand. "We'll deal with the asset recovery next," he said. "But for now, she's done." And she was. The cabin was quiet again. For the first time in months, the air felt still, not heavy with tension, not buzzing with security alerts or legal maneuvering, just quiet. The kind of silence I'd bought this land for in the first place. The birds had come back. So had the deer. Even the pine needles seemed to rustle a little softer, like the whole forest had exhaled after a long siege. It had been 2 weeks since the court ruling. Karen was still in custody, awaiting formal arraignment. The DA had expanded the charges after they dug into that off-site storage unit. What started as trespass and forgery had ballooned into 6 felony counts, including conspiracy, falsification of county documents, and attempted land fraud for financial gain. The press was calling it the Fairwood HOA scandal, and apparently they were already filming a Netflix docuseries. I didn't care. Let them sensationalize it. I had fences to rebuild. The Aspen Pines Vista HOA had gone into full meltdown. Their board was dissolved by emergency vote after the verdict. The new acting president, a woman named Sheila Mendez, showed up at my property in person one morning with 2 other members and a formal letter of apology. She stood at my gate, hands folded, and said, "We can't undo what happened, but we can own it. You were right to fight back." I nodded, accepted the envelope, and said nothing. That was enough. The money came in fast, faster than I expected. Their insurance scrambled to cover the court-ordered $1.5 million in damages, and while most of that was slated for legal fees, land restoration, and security upgrades, I set aside a piece of it for something else. I hired a local metalworker to craft a new entry sign. It was forged from cold steel, 4 feet wide, painted forest green with bold white lettering. I mounted it myself, just above the rebuilt gate. Private property not for HOA use. Especially not for Karen word got around. People started driving up just to take pictures with the sign. A biker club from Eureka left a sticker on the post. Someone hung a little wreath on it near Christmas. I didn't mind. It had become more than a fence now. It was a warning, a statement. I got letters, actual handwritten ones from other landowners across California, even some from Arizona and Oregon. Stories about similar HOA harassment, threats, or land encroachment. One guy said my case gave him the courage to sue his HOA for finding him over a truck in his driveway. Another said he forwarded the court ruling to his zoning board to stop a proposed development on his ranch. It wasn't just my win anymore. It was something bigger. Every now and then, I'd still see Wallace's black SUV down the hill, lingering near the trailhead, but he never approached. Not after what happened. His expansion was dead. His barn plans revoked. No one wanted to touch land tied up in a criminal investigation. Thomas told me that the judge issued a ban on Karen ever holding a leadership position in any homeowners association in the state of California. Her husband's LLC was under IRS audit. The world was collapsing around them brick by entitled brick. One afternoon, I was sitting on the porch watching a hawk circle above the treetops when a battered SUV rolled up the road. It stopped just outside the gate. The woman inside didn't get out right away. I recognized her only when she opened the door slowly and stepped into the sun. Karen, no makeup, jeans, and a sweater. She looked smaller somehow. Not physically, just deflated. I stood. "I'm not here to fight," she said, voice quiet. "I know I have no right. I just needed to say it." I didn't answer. I was wrong. About the land, about everything. It stopped being about access a long time ago. I let power get in the way of judgment. She looked down at her boots. "I don't expect forgiveness. I just thought you should hear it from me before the sentencing." A long pause hung between us. I finally said, "You nearly burned down everything I worked for." "I know," she said. "And you stopped me." "You were right to." She turned to leave. "Karen," I called after her. She stopped. "4th of July's in 3 weeks. I throw a barbecue every year. If you're not in prison by then, you can come." She didn't say anything, but I saw her shoulders drop, just slightly, like she'd been holding something heavy for too long. "I'll think about it," she said. And then she was gone. I don't know if she'll show. I don't particularly care. What I do care about is this. The gate holds. The land is mine. The silence is back. And from here on out, anyone thinking of messing with Clint Barlow will have to read the sign first and remember exactly how that went for Karen.